Welcome, ladies. We're back again. And today we want to talk about loving the people around us, loving the world, because we found love and love transformed our lives. And so we owe the world an encounter with love. Right, Jackie?
Yes, we do. I'm excited to talk about this.
Me too.
I think it's so important. I think as Christians, as ones who, like you just said, have been found by love, who know Jesus, who knows the answer, the way to peace, we owe it to a dying and hurting and broken world. And there's nobody better I've seen do this and hear stories about than you. And like what comes to my mind is Jordan one time was, well, yeah, my mom was just in the hot tub. She'd lead everyone to the Lord. Oh, my mom was at the store. She'd lead everyone to the Lord. I'm like, how does she do that? So I want to ask you first, why is it so important that we stop for the one? What does that mean to you, and how have you walked that out and learned that in your life?
Well, I think whenever we encounter love and we experience the transformation that love brings, it's like then it's our place to go out and give it away. I mean, think, Jackie, if we found the cure to cancer, wouldn't you be telling everybody about this find?
Yeah.
I find a good restaurant and I have to tell everybody everywhere I go about the restaurant, right? Yeah. And so if I didn't tell the world about this love that came in and changed me, then what a waste. Yeah. What a waste. But we're called to love the Lord with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all our soul, and we're called to love our neighbor as ourselves. Right. We're really here to love God, to love people, and to love ourselves, right?
So good. So why do you think, I think from my personal experience in walking in the church for a number of years, loving the Lord with all our heart, mind, and soul is not hard. It's vulnerable to a degree, but you can be in your room with the door shut, speaking to your Father in heaven, who you're telling all your vulnerable secrets about, who you're talking to. But yeah, he says to then love your neighbor as yourself. The great commandment is those two. So why do you think part one is so easy and part two is so left out of many Christian people's walks? Why do you think we hold back from loving our neighbor as ourselves? What's in the way?
Well, I could really go there, but what's in the way is we don't love ourselves, right? That's the real issue. I mean, I've been on a journey of trying to love God, love people, love myself, and it has taken forever for me to actually love myself. When that happens, that's when love takes over. That's when we become love. Yeah. But that's a different topic. We have to, I think, love God and get his heart for the people. Number one, people are messy, and people aren't always easy to love. But I think because we don't truly love ourselves and we don't truly know who we are, that we are really afraid to love people. We're afraid to dive into their pain. We're afraid to get in the boat with them. We're afraid to share Jesus with them because we don't think we have what it takes to do it well, right? So we start starting to share Jesus, and then we shrink back because what if they ask us a question that we can't answer? Or what if they have some witty comment that we can't come back to? Or what if we don't know the question that they ask us? And so I think fear holds us back from really stepping out and risking, because it takes a risk, to step out and love people. And it takes a risk to share our faith with people, right?
Yeah, I think that's where we have to first recognize that Jesus didn't command us to do this because it's easy. And he didn't say, love your neighbor as yourself, and that's going to be a walk in the park. It's super easy. But he calls us to things that are hard, and he equips us with it. So when you're saying these obstacles, I completely agree. Fear comes in. And if God's commanding us to love our neighbors, then there's the enemy, which we talked about on our last video, of he's doing the exact opposite. He's trying to get us to do everything in his power to keep us from sharing the love of God with our neighbors, to the ones who don't know, the ones who have been hurt. And okay, so we know that's the reality. God's commanded us to love our neighbors. The enemy hates that command and wants to stop us with all his might. So how do we break through that? You do it. So I know sometimes you do things you don't even realize how easy you make it look. But you lead people to the Lord left and right. You stop for the one behind the register. You look into this lady's eyes who's a single mom, who's broken, who's walking through something. The Lord gives you downloads. But can you just maybe let us into what that looks like, or talk about a time that you've done that, and then we can kind of fish out, okay, how do we get there? Because I want to be practical. Like, I want these video conversations to transform lives.
Yeah, well, I never ever will claim to be very good at this.
Yeah.
The only thing I will tell you is that I get connected to the love of God. And anytime I go out, my heart's goal every morning when I walk out of my house is to love the person that God brings in front of me. And there are times, like I had a raging stomach ache the other day, and I was at a grocery store, and this woman was having a rough day, and she was a little rough with me, to be honest with you. And everything in me wanted to be a little grumpy back at her.
Totally.
But I chose not to, because I wanted to walk out of that store knowing that I loved that woman that was in front of me. And so I ended up saying something very encouraging to her. And I remember as I was walking out, she looked at me. So my whole objective is to be love wherever I go and whatever I do. I do lead a lot of people to Christ, but I don't go out with the objective that, oh, I'm leading somebody to Christ today. Yeah. In fact, I don't even think about that, but I'm always in the back of my mind knowing that if God opens the door, then I'm going to walk through it. But my heart's goal is every person I come in contact, when I walk away, I want to leave them better than I found them. I want to leave them more encouraged, feeling blessed. A woman walked by me in a restaurant. I was with a friend of mine, and she walked by. She was about my age. And as she was walking by, I just whispered, and I said, "You look absolutely beautiful in that outfit." And she looked at me like stunned by that comment, because she's not used to people actually doing that. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, when I what I see and think, I try to speak it.
Yeah, you do.
And then when I walk away, even if I never see them again, I feel blessed, because I know that if I were her and somebody did that to me, that it would mean a lot to me, right? Because the world doesn't give us a lot of love. It doesn't give us a lot of encouragement. So those of us that carry love, we get to give it away in the simplest ways and in the biggest ways. And then when we do that, if God opens the door, then we keep walking through and see where the door takes us.
Do you remember when you made that shift or that commitment in your mind? Like, I'm going to leave my house each day and I'm going to see the one that's in front of me. Was there a transformative event in your life that caused you to that? Or when was that?
I tell you, my 13-year-old girl had such a radical encounter with love that I think it started then. And it's grown as I've learned to love God more, as I've learned to love others, but most importantly, when I learned to actually love myself. Yeah. You know, this year was a hard year and I would never want to repeat it, but I'm so thankful for it, Jackie, because the one thing that I can tell you that happened in me this year is I grew to love myself more this year. Yeah. And I can tell the difference in who I am, how I walk on planet Earth, how I interact with people, because when we live loved, everything is different and love just comes out of us. And not only that, but everything that we fight for, everything that we overcome, we now carry inside of us. And we get to give it away, right? Right. Think about that. Think about the power of that. Yeah. It makes our suffering worth it. Totally. Because we have something to offer a hurting, broken world. Right. You know, can I share a story about being on an airplane? Yeah. So one of my greatest fears is being trapped, and especially trapped and thirsty or not able to breathe. And listen, I still deal with this fear. There will come a day when I will be completely free of it. But I've gone after so much fear in my life, and I used to not even be able to get on airplanes. Now I can fly in complete freedom. But I was walking onto this airplane, and that fear came on me as I'm walking on the airplane. I turned around, went and stood at a window, looked up, and I began reminding the Lord of who I am. Lord, I am your daughter. Like I live by your kingdom principles and I am loved. And I just started encouraging myself. And then all of a sudden that fear was diminished. So I walked onto the plane, got on, and it wasn't until we were close to the end of the flight that the woman right across from me, an older woman, I looked over and she was having a full-blown anxiety attack and she couldn't breathe. And I didn't know who was next to her. It turned out to be her daughter. Her daughter was sort of panicking and didn't know what to do. So she just opened a book and just started ignoring her mother. And I'll tell you what, something rose up inside of me. I climbed over the woman next to me, wrapped my arms around this woman, held her tight, and I started speaking encouragement into her. And I don't even know what all was coming out of my mouth, but everything I've been through with that. I've had full-blown panic attacks on elevators and pinched strangers and caused everybody to run off the elevator. I know what this place feels like, and it's horrible. So I just kept holding her, telling her I'm not going anywhere. And I was just speaking peace into her, and whatever was in me was coming out. And all of a sudden, she took a deep breath. It was like, oh. And then it continued, and she started to breathe again. And I just continued to hold. And then I began to tell her about the love of God. And in that moment, she looked at me. I was holding her so tight, she could barely turn to look at me. But she did, and she looked in my eyes, and then she started to cry. And right there on that plane, I led her to Christ. And the peace of God that came over her was tangible. Not only came over her, it came over me. And it was because, oh, no, not on my watch. Right. That's not going to happen because I have overcome that. And it was no accident that the Lord put her right next to me. We owe the world an encounter with the love of God, and we get to give them everything that we carry inside of us.
And God's so faithful. I love that story because he's so faithful to bring, like we think sometimes our paths are accidental or who we might, there's no such thing as coincidence in the kingdom, I don't think. No. But he's so faithful to bring us in to atmospheres and situations and circumstances with people that are walking through the very things that we've either broken free from or can relate, or even if we can't, we know that we have, like you said, we have something to offer. And I think as Christians, the more we believe and hang on to that and know that our very yes and our obedience to go up to someone who is evidently struggling, you can see anxiety, you could see fear on people. If we just go up to them and open our mouths, like isn't his kindness, he comes and he adds to it. He says, love your neighbor as yourself, but he isn't saying, go and get your best words and make sure you don't fumble and aren't awkward. Like we're so awkward half the time. Oh. Hey, is your name Larry? No, okay, I just have a word from God for you and you're beautiful. Like sometimes it's so awkward, but if we give room for the Holy Spirit, one, he sometimes gives us mysteries about the person we can share and begin to speak life directly to their circumstance. That's only by the grace of God. We can never do that. And two, I always hang on to the encouragement of myself is like, okay, God is going to use that. He's going to continue to water that seed. So sometimes we're just a seed and there's a lot of seeds. Like maybe you ran into Susie at the supermarket and you said, you look beautiful today. And then I ran into her because we live in the same city and there's a bunch of Christians walking around. I ran into Susie again and just said, hey, I have a word. Like God was just highlighted you and wanted me to encourage you and tell you he's with you. Then now Susie has two seeds from God, and then it's his job to water it. Like we are the hands and feet, we're the vessels, but I think sometimes we take too much credit. When you said earlier, well, what if I don't say the right thing or have the right answer? Don't you think that's a little prideful of us to worry about those things when he doesn't command us to love our neighbor as ourselves and make sure we know every Bible story front to back and are theologically sound and how we lead them to his name and preach at them. He's just saying like, love them, which is so simple as, how are you? Simple. You look beautiful. I did that once at my eyebrow place of all places, but I mean, this girl is like on it. She's so good at her job. She's like, but when I check out, you gotta go. You're in there for those appointments. No one wants to be there, right. But we gotta have our eyebrows cleaned up. Then you leave, you're ready to go. So she's always like, all right, your next appointment, do you wanna leave a tip? Boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, and I'm walking out the door. I just turn around. I'm like, you're really good at your job. And her face, that's all I said. Yes. It just lit up. And now every time I go once a month, she's like, hey, how are you? Like, it's just those simple.
You leave her feeling loved better than you found her.
Yes.
That's what we want to do. Somebody once said, "You carry pixie dust everywhere you go," and I was like, "I do? Well, come on!" But I love what you said about seeds.
Yeah.
I think we're all gardeners.
Yeah.
And I think God gives every one of us a bag of seed.
Right.
And we get to go and plant those seeds. And some of us actually do the planting. Some of us come along and do the watering. Some of us fertilize. And some of us are called to actually close the deal, lead them to Christ, right? And that's the hardest part. And that's the scary part, is we're actually going to go out there and risk. But we're not called to do anything other than our part. And I think sometimes people get this idea that you have to know it all, do it all, beginning to the end. And if I went in like that, I would never do it because I would feel so overwhelmed. But we just have to do our part. And I know that there's going to come a day we're going to stand before the Lord, and I don't want to have any seeds left in my bag. I want to know that I gave out every single seed, and God calls us. He says, go and share the gospel. And if you've had an encounter with God, come on, get filled with faith. Get pumped up. Go give that away. Go tell other people what happened to you. You don't have to quote the scriptures. Just tell them what I did in your life. And then watch what happens when you tell your story. It's like your story then feeds them and makes them hungry for more.
True. And I just think of like the Father's face or how he's looking down on us when we are like, okay, I need to talk to that person. I see the Lord on them, or I see they're struggling. And like, he's probably just like, good job, honey. Like, he's so pleased that we're even aware. Yes. And I know, because he's chosen us. Like, whether we like it or not, he's chosen to use us. I think I said this the last time, and it's like, it makes no sense to me. It never will. When I get to heaven, I'll be like, why did you pick such fragile, broken people to carry the good news and the gospel? And he knows better. His ways are higher, so we can trust that there's a reason. But it's like he needs us. And so sometimes I feel like it might not always be pride, but getting over ourselves, past our qualifications or what we think is enough to be able to do these small little like acts of kindness, generosity, encouragement, and then the boldness of leading people to the Lord, inviting them to church. I think there's such an importance of stepping past ourselves and getting over ourselves, because the reality is, like, we're in a war, and there's two like options. A territory is either owned and dominated by the kingdom of light or the kingdom of darkness. And so, for example, I had this conviction. I've told you a little bit about this, about the gym I work at. Work out at. I don't work there. I work out there. And it's super small, a lot of old people, just one of those quiet places. But I saw this man limping around. We're in the midst of our glory conference where people are seeing signs, wonders, and miracles. God's breaking in with his healing, physically healing bodies of people thrown off their mountain bike, don't need surgery, right? So how am I going to go to the gym the next day, see a man hobbling around that clearly needs healing because we're supposed to walk straight, right? And not say something. So I'm like, oh, great. Because when the thought pops in your mind, the Lord's speaking, if you are aware. So I just went up, I'm like, hey, what's your name? And he actually works there, but I asked him to pray, and he denied, which is okay. But what's cool is he is so aware. He remembers my name every time I go back now. He's like, hey, Jackie, how's it going? And I'm like, hey. And I was so chill about it. I'm like, hey, I'd love to pray for you. Here's what I've seen God do. Like, this is crazy. I act like a child like awe and wonder. I'm like, God, like, healed this guy who fell off his mountain bike. Do you want me to pray for you? He might do it for you. It's just like, I don't know, but we could try, kind of a thing. Just super approachable and not religious. And so he had come from, he's like, I tried all the things. I've been to churches. He gave me his whole story. But I feel like, okay, that gym, that area of ground, of territory is not overcome by the kingdom of light yet. Like, it needs light. It's in the dark places. And how many places, grocery stores, like places that we just consider the mundane, that we're so hurried to run in and out of because of our own agenda and our own time, do we just buzz through and not recognize it? Like, oh, this place needs some light. Like, it's easy to see in a brothel, in a strip club, in a bar, everyone's drunk. But what about just the day-to-day places that we are walking in stewarding, and God's trusted us to visit?
Yeah, and we carry the atmosphere of heaven.
Right.
Well, when we're spending time in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
true.
it has to start there, right? When we're spending time in the presence, when we're realizing that heaven is here and, Jesus came and brought heaven.
Yeah.
The more we spend time in heaven, the more we carry the atmosphere of heaven. So I always try to remember when I walk into a grocery store, okay, walk in with the atmosphere of heaven. Go in carrying that with you so that the people that, Bill Johnson, I remember he told a story once just about, a man who came up to him in a grocery store and said, there's something different about you. And
Come on.
so I always think about that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want people to actually
really
walk into
good.
my atmosphere and say, there's something different about you, But we carry heaven, and everywhere we go, we get to take it with us.
That's a good reminder because it takes off the pressure of, well, I need to say the right thing, be the right thing, or even pray sometimes. He's not asking us like, oh, if you didn't pray for them or mention Jesus, that was a lost cause. Like you said, if we just walk in that confidence, I hope people look. I was in a sorority in college and it was like 50% party girls, 50% Christian girls. Don't ask which one. No, I was a Christian girl. I really was, by the grace of God. And the ones that would party and go to the bars, then we're over here like not going to the bars, not partying, leading high schoolers and young life and things like this. And I'm like, well, what about our lives would make the party girls say, I'd rather leave the bars and all the fun and the dancing and the boys to be like you guys. You guys look like boring and, you're still anxious. You have eating disorders, like real talk, like you said, we need to spend time in heaven, but what does it look like? I want to talk about this a little bit with the atmosphere. How do we look set apart? What does that look like? How should a Christian who's immersed in the atmosphere of heaven look? What should they bring to their day-to-day so that people come up like Bill Johnson?
LOVE.
Yeah, it's
love.
true. It's so
it
true.
all comes down to love.
Yeah.
When people feel loved by you, they want to know you.
Yeah.
They want to hear you. So crazy. I bought something on Facebook Marketplace, and
No way.
yeah, I know. Story of my life. Anyway, and we were messaging back and forth, and she was being real abrupt. No, I can't meet this morning, and I had no other time except in the morning. So then I was very kind back to her. And I just said to her, it's okay, no worries. I'll just try to message you another day. 5 minutes later, this was just a couple days ago, she messages me back. I'm trying to buy a $350 hammock from her. And she goes, actually, I just put the hammock on my front porch. And she goes, I just want to give it to you.
I
was like, give it? Like, you just want to give it
That's
to me,
a
girl?
big discount.
No, I went and picked it up, got it for free. But it was because even though she was a little abrupt with me, I came back with love, right? And the same thing happened. I went and 2 times this week, I went and bought something on Facebook Marketplace. And both times, I loved on the women in front of me. It's one of my reasons that I buy off there, because I get to meet people all over this valley, and I get to get cool stuff at good prices. But anyway, both women asked me for my phone number. Both women asked if they could have coffee with me. Wow. Why? Because I actually slowed down. I took the time to ask them questions. And in doing that, they felt love. And then they wanted to connect with me again. It was His love that they were sensing in me. It all boils down to loving the one in front of us.
So good. So before we close, I want to talk just a little bit about practicals, because we said, you don't have to be theologically sound, you don't have to preach the Bible, you don't have to pray necessarily, but so what do we do? So people are sowing their seeds, but we feel like it's the closing moment. Like we need to bring Jesus. We feel in our spirit, we need to talk about Jesus and ask if they want to accept Jesus into their hearts. So you've led people to the Lord in a hot tub, in an airplane. And what do you do? I really want to know this, because I
wish I had all the answers for you, because I just look for opportunities to connect with their heart.
Yeah.
Right? I always look for opportunities to ask questions, and I genuinely want to hear what people have to say. I personally love people's stories. Yeah. And if people feel like you're pursuing them, they begin to let their guards down and they begin to talk to you, right? Yeah. And so I always try to just get to somebody's heart and find out who they are. And once I get there, then I'm like, okay, Lord, what are we doing? And then I really follow the Lord. But most of the time I end up sharing. Did I share about the jacuzzi story?
No.
So I was in Hawaii during the end of my marriage, right as my marriage was being demolished. And I went down to the jacuzzi and I was in so much pain. I was crying out to God. And here comes this gentleman into the pool, into the jacuzzi, only one's out there. And I was like, oh no, the Lord said he needs my love. And so I'm like, okay, all right. So I start pursuing him. He ends up opening up, telling me all these things that he's doing that are really not good. And in the jacuzzi, I end up leading him to Christ. And so then he kept saying, I think you're an angel. I'm like, no, I'm really not. I'm a human being. So the next day I'm in the swimming pool, packed out swimming area. And all of a sudden here he comes with his wife yelling, there she is, there she is. And everybody's looking. I'm like, oh my word, he's talking about me. He comes down, I swim over to the edge. He goes, I want you to know that I told my wife everything. I confessed everything. And my wife gave her life to the Lord. So 10 years later, I'm in Hawaii. I'm by myself. And I want to go back to this resort and back to this jacuzzi. I'm all dressed up, just finished dinner. I put my feet in the jacuzzi and it's packed with people. I start asking them questions and getting them talking. And then they start asking me questions like, why are you here by yourself? Yeah. And all of a sudden I go, Lord, they're all listening intently to me. Yeah. And I was vulnerable and I actually told them the real reason I was there. Wow. And they're just like, I'm owning them. Like they're just right there. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do right now. Yeah. And so I said, Lord, what do we do? All of a sudden he gives me a prophetic word for the one guy. And I said, well, I actually want to just tell you, I have a word from God for you. And I kind of gave him a little background about that. And he's like, okay, all right, go ahead. So I give him this prophetic word and everybody is just dying. Ah, she nailed you. And it was just funny and everybody's laughing. And then they're like, give him one. I was like, oh Lord, I'm not that good. Lord, help a girl out. Yeah. And I tell you, they just started flowing out of my mind. And all at the same time, I think there were 6 or 7 of them, they gave their life to Jesus Christ in the same jacuzzi that was one of the worst nights I've ever had. And it was like, you talk about redemption. Yeah. So honestly, I just follow the Lord. Jackie, I'm going to be really honest and vulnerable.
Yes, please.
I don't really know all the scriptures. You know, people like memorize all the scriptures, the Roman walk. I've tried. For spiritual laws, I used to carry that in case I didn't know what to say. I would pull that out. I don't really know all the scriptures. I just know ABC. You know, everybody has to accept that they're sinners. Mm-hmm. Everybody falls short of the glory of God, right? So somehow you got to go there, right? B, you know, everybody has to, you know, believe that Jesus Christ is Lord and that he shed his blood to cover and pay for our sin, right? And then C, they have to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So I always keep the ABCs in the back of my head and I make sure we go to all of those steps. I don't know all the right scriptures. I don't. I just let my heart lead and I let love be what goes before me, right? And then I just get honest and vulnerable about what Jesus has done for me. And then it happens, you know? But then I'm sometimes the closer, so that really is the hardest part because it's like, okay, I can do this. I have to cheer myself on. I get nervous. Yes, and I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to look dumb. But I can tell you this, that I have given many people an opportunity, and they're like, no, no, thank you. One time in front of all my kids and a bunch of friends, and I'm going to town, and I go in to like give them the opportunity, and they're like, no, excuse us, and got up and just walked off. I was sitting there like, I'm so embarrassed. But this is, you know, Campus Crusade, their whole motto is go in the power of the Holy Spirit, share the gospel, and then leave the results to God, right? He's the Savior. He's the one, not me. It's really relying on him, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. So it's just letting God lead you the way that you are. You know, you don't have to do it like anybody else. I think people get it in their head that they have to do it a certain way. You don't. Just go in love, be you, Be the way you are. And if you're intended to plant a seed, plant it. If you're supposed to fertilize it, my goodness, give it a little fertilizer. Give a little something, something. Tell about something God has done in you.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
And then if God actually wants you to get in there and be brave and lead him to Christ, just do it.
Yeah.
You know, fear is always present when I do it. But I just don't partner with the fear.
good.
I
Do it
just do it afraid.
Come on.
Right? And sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes it doesn't. But I just walk away knowing that I did the best I could to give them everything I've been given. Right? And then I leave in peace. And then when something beautiful happens, I leave on top of the world. When the jacuzzi thing happened, it was late, but I called all my boys. I'm like, you've got to hear what just happened. I think I was floating on a cloud for days after that. Like, wow, the creator of the universe just used me to change 6 couples' lives. Wow. Humbled and blessed and thankful and can't wait to do it again.
Right. That's beautiful. That's powerful, and only God.
Only God.
I feel like I want to say this at every video we do, but he's always just present with our authentic self. So he's not asking us to be, he's not asking me to be you. I'm not going to say rah, rah, okay. But he's just asking us to be our authentic selves. And sometimes it's in the midst of a hard day or when we don't feel like it. But if we just go to someone and when they say, why are you here? We could have this fear of being too religious but we could just be honest and say, this is really what's going on. Or, you know, we do owe the world an encounter with God, and we have that to give. So we're doing ourselves and them and everybody we encounter a disservice when we're not honest. If you have been saved and loved and radically changed by the love of God, you should be talking about it. So I love this conversation. I love what you shared. And I think women that listen are going to be really inspired that it's not crazy hard. It's not this tall Mount Everest, but today when you go outside of your house, just remember who you are, whose you are, and bring love to the world.
Yep, go love the
Simple
world.
as that.
If you found the cure to cancer, you would be telling everybody about it. Yeah. You found the answer to life.
Come on.
Go tell the world about him.
Amen.
Amen.